Hello and welcome to the Christ and Culture webcast. I'm your host, Taylor DeSoto. Today I wanted to talk about two things. The first, I want to talk about a new article series that I'm putting up on my blog, youngtextlessreformed.com. And the second, I want to talk about the readability of the King James. So this article series that I started a few days ago is reviewing the book by Mark Ward called Authorized, The Use and Misuse of the King James Version. So my goal in reviewing this work is manifold. I want to use it as an opportunity to examine the power of rhetoric and anecdote. I want to use this series to clarify places of misrepresentation that are in this book. And I want to offer some critiques, and I want to offer some solutions to the supposed problem that Mark Ward presents in his book. So I plan to do this in a series of articles. I've written two already, and I imagine that what I initially set out to do is going to expand as I start to read the book, starting chapter 3 probably today or tomorrow. So 3 things just to give you guys a taste of what kind of analysis I'll be doing. I've noticed that Mark Ward has a style of writing, of persuasive writing, which heavily focuses around rhetoric, anecdotes, and narrative. So it's very whimsical, very lighthearted, but basically, the writing style of Mark Ward demonstrates the power of rhetoric in giving the validity of a fact to an opinion. And this is a hallmark trait of well-written persuasive writing. So to demonstrate this point, I'll give one example. In the beginning of Mark Ward's book, he says out of every 100 Americans who pulled a Bible off a shelf today, 55 of them pulled down a King James version. I feel fairly safe in saying that the King James is this only 1611 release still on any bestseller lists. All the same, 55% is only slightly more than half, and the trend line is clear, for it started at 100%. So, and then he goes on to say, why is this? Because people say they no longer can understand it. So he uses a couple of pieces of rhetoric here. First, he provides a really powerful data point. 55%, that's most Christians who read a Bible read the King James. Then he kind of lightens up and says, that's the only book from 1611 still on bestseller lists. Ha 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 ha. And then he provides his opinion that the reason for this is because the King James is simply not readable. And so this is the premise of his book, that people cannot understand the KJV anymore. Unfortunately, his claim is contradicted by the data point that he actually provides. So 55% of Christians read the King James of the ones that read their Bible. So that is to say, of the people who read their Bible, most of them can understand the KJV because they read it. And that's not to say the people that read the ESV or the NASB that can understand the King James but have switched for other reasons. So one of the interesting things about this spin is the narrative that Ward is presenting to his reader on page 1. He's essentially saying this: yeah, most people can read the King James and do read the King James. He even says that he can read the King James and has since he was at least a 3rd grader. But all the while, people can't read it, and that's why they're leaving the King James. So this is the first contradiction in his book. The data point and the anecdote he provides contradict the narrative that he is about to present to his reader. So the narrative is contradicted because I would argue that most people have left the King James not because of its readability. King James is actually quite easy to read. Not that it's, less difficult than the ESV or anything like that. It's obviously more challenging than modern versions because those are, the version, essentially the editorial section of the newspaper version of Bibles. But I would argue that if you gave an English-speaking person with a high school education a King James, they could get by. And with a little work, they could become fluent, as the scholars say. So this narrative essentially negates the entire reality that for the last couple decades, the key textbook for New Testament studies has been the text of the New Testament, its transmission, corruption, and restoration by Metzger and Bart Ehrman. And so in presenting the narrative that the reason people are leaving the King James is because they can't understand it, there's a pretty large segment of people that have left reading the King James for a lot of other reasons, specifically the issue of textual criticism, and simply because these pastors go to seminary, they come back to a King James Bible church and they say, we're reading the ESV now. I would argue that captures a good amount. I don't have any data to support it, and unlike Ward, I will not make a truth claim based on something without data. But by presenting the part of the whole picture, like just a part of the whole picture, the reader is introduced to a partial explanation of the story. And this is really problematic. So in doing this, Ward is able to present the case that the only reason people retain the KJV is, quote, due to, quote, habit, conviction, or mere loyalty and love. We quite naturally attach to the things we value. So he's made this a sentimental issue, essentially. Conviction and sentimentality. And so I would argue the fundamental group of people who have abandoned the KJV are the ones captured by the text criticism and Ammer. But we'll give Mark Ward the benefit of the doubt that he wasn't trying to do that, but this is why narrative is so important in persuasive writing. So this is kind of a taste of what you're going to get in my article series. You're going to see me quoting Ward, you're going to see me interacting with Ward, you're going to see me exposing some of the rhetorical devices that he's employing to make his point move along. And in this video right now, I'm essentially going to do three things now. I'm going to demonstrate how chapter 1 of Mark Ward's book, or the introduction of Mark Ward's book, disproves his premise. And then I'm going to offer a solution to Mark Ward's supposed problem. So the reason that the introduction of Mark Ward's book invalidates his entire premise is based on what he wrote himself. So in the introduction, he says that 55% of the people who bought English Bibles or read English Bibles, the statistics show that people who read their English Bible, most of them, 55% or more, read the King James Version. Secondly, he provides an anecdote that said, as a young child, he had no problem reading the King James. In fact, he went to his teacher and said, can we have a King James Bible English day where we speak in King James English? So not only do most Christians who read their Bible understand the King James, Mark Ward as a child understood the King James and has made a whole series of videos explaining all the difficult words in the King James. So clearly Mark Ward understands it, except it's really funny. He self-admittedly, really interestingly, there was a few words in the King James that he thought meant something different for his whole life. And I'm just like, dude, that's not a good look for you. You're a King James scholar, apparently. Not a good look. Anyway, so that's in the introduction of the book. He disproves the premise of his book. Most Christians can read it. Mark Ward can read it. So who is this audience? Who is this audience? People that don't read the King James. So it's, from my perspective, kind of a pointless book. So those are the first two things I wanted to say. The third thing is, if the supposed problem is that people cannot understand it, then I would argue that they are the group of people he's talking to because they haven't read it. The people who think they cannot understand the King James Bible are the people that have not read it. It's as simple as that. Why? Because every King James version that I have owned has marginal helps. So I'll just turn to a page in the Old Testament and I'll look just all over the place. There's little notes everywhere talking about, or not talking about, but defining words differently for you so that you can understand what they say if they're archaic. And even most King James Bibles will give you more than you need. So the Thomas Nelson ones are a great example of giving you way more words than you could ever need defined for you. So there's a lot of helps all over the place. So let's just take a look at one. I'm having trouble. My eyes are having trouble tracing right now, but let's see. Okay, so I will requite thee in this plat, said the Lord. Okay, so that's actually a really good example. I will requite thee in this plat. So I will repay thee in this property. Right there. Has it right there for me. So my point is this, that I just chose a pretty hard verse that you probably didn't know what those two words meant, and within 5 seconds I had the answer because they're in my margin. So if the goal is to help people how to read their King James, most King James versions do that for you. They help you out in the margin. And in the back, there's usually lists of archaic words. So there's the solution. There's a solution to the problem. Now, if I were raised on the King James, I probably would have no problem. I wouldn't need those marginal helps. Now, there's different philosophies on whether or not that's allowed, right? Can we have redefinitions of the King James Bible? And this is a point that Mark Ward loves to harp on because he thinks that people that read the King James are all idiots. So the reality is, if you're taking a synonym of a word that's going to help you understand an archaic word or even a word that's too difficult to understand based on your vocabulary, that is not a problem. It actually teaches you the word because it defines it. It gives you a synonym and it helps you understand the word that was originally translated by the King James translator, and helps you understand why did they choose this word over this word? Why did they choose that word over that word? So there's a solution. In the introduction of Mark Ward's book, Authorized, the Use and Misuse of the King James Version, Mark Ward disproves his own thesis, and the problem he's trying to solve is answered by just about every single modern printing of the King James Bible. So that's all I've got. Pastor Dane Johansson had a helpful couple of videos recently on the Agros Church blog. Highly recommend you go check those out. If you have any interest in viewing my blog series, it's on youngtextlessreformed.com, where I will be providing an in-depth commentary on every single chapter in that book with the hope that the book just kind of goes away. I think it's kind of a useless book because his premise is flawed and the solution to his problem already exists. Anyway, thanks for watching. This has been Christ and Culture with your host, Taylor DeSoto. May the Lord bless you and keep you.